His laugh hit my back before I reached the restaurant doors. I almost kept walking. My hand was already on the brass handle, cold and polished under my fingers, when I heard one of the men behind Adrian say, "You really invited your secretary?" Then another voice. Softer, meaner. The one with the cardigans? Their laughter rolled over the sidewalk like broken glass. I stood there in my plain gray coat, drugstore lipstick, hair pinned the way I always wore it because it stayed out of my face when I worked late. Across the reflection in the dark window, I saw them gathered near the black SUVs, tailored suits, expensive watches, women draped in silk and diamonds. Adrian stood in the middle of all of it like the city had been built around him. He did not laugh the loudest. That was worse. He just lowered his eyes, adjusted one cuff, and let the joke breathe. For 3 years, I had managed his calendar, filtered his calls, memorized the habits of violent men who never said please, and made sure nothing touched his desk that could waste his time. I knew exactly how still Adrian became when he wanted to watch something unfold. Tonight, that something was me. I should have left. I should have turned around, walked the 2 blocks back to the subway, gone home to my 1-bedroom apartment over the pharmacy, kicked off my cheap heels, and told myself none of this mattered. Tomorrow, I could have emailed my resignation before sunrise and never stepped in a Voss tower again. Instead, I opened the door. Warm light spilled over me first. Gold. Soft. Merciless. The maitre d' looked at me, then at the reservation list, and his posture changed so fast it was almost a bow. This way. Every head turned. The restaurant was all marble floors and low amber lamps, all crystal and white linen and old money trying not to look impressed by new money. My heels clicked too loudly. I felt every stare land on my coat, my sensible dress, my glasses. Adrian was waiting near the private dining room, one hand in his pocket, the other resting beside a glass of bourbon he hadn't touched. He looked at me once, from the top of my pinned hair to the hem of my dress. No warmth. No apology. Just assessment. "Evelyn," he said, like he had not humiliated me 10 seconds earlier. Like this was all perfectly normal. I stopped in front of him and slipped off my coat. The room went silent. I had spent half my paycheck on the dress. Navy silk. Clean lines. Open shoulders. Nothing vulgar. Nothing desperate. It fit me the way I had spent years pretending I did not want anything to fit me. Exactly. I had taken my hair down in the cab and twisted it into something softer. My lipstick was deeper now. My glasses stayed on. I watched the silence strike the table before it reached Adrian. One of the rival dinner guests lowered his wine glass without drinking. A woman in emerald satin looked openly annoyed. One of Adrian's own inner circle actually straightened. And Adrian forgot to blink. It lasted maybe 2 seconds. Maybe less. But I lived inside that silence long enough to feel the balance shift. His gaze lifted back to my face, sharper now, as if he were searching for the mistake he had made. "Was there a dress code in the invitation?" I asked. "Or just a punchline?" No one moved. A smile almost touched the mouth of one man at the table before he buried it. Adrian's jaw tightened. Not with anger. With surprise. Good. He pulled out my chair himself. That shocked the room more than my dress. I looked at the chair, then at him. "You don't have to perform manners now." His voice dropped low enough that only I could hear it. "Sit down, Evelyn." There it was. The command. The control. The version of him everyone else obeyed without thinking. Usually I did too. Tonight, I set my purse on the table first. Deliberately. Crystal glasses caught the chandelier light and broke it into hard white shards across the tablecloth. My purse sat beside Adrian Voss's hand like a challenge I had placed between us on purpose. Around us, 12 sets of eyes pretended not to stare. The 6 people from the Voss syndicate inner circle went still in that dangerous way polished predators do. The 4 rival dinner guests smiled too carefully. No one missed the fact that I had not sat when told. I touched the back of the chair. Not to obey, to measure the room. "I'll sit," I said softly, "when I know why I'm here." A fork stopped halfway to someone's mouth. Adrian Voss did not move for one full breath. Then he leaned in just enough for the spice of his cologne and the heat of his body to cut through the cold air rolling off the vent above us. His face stayed unreadable. That made it worse. "You're here because I invited you." As a joke, that landed. I saw it in the slight shift at the far end of the table. One of the rival dinner guests looked down too fast. One of the 6 from the inner circle reached for a water glass he did not need. Tiny cracks. Tiny truths. The corner of Adrian Voss's mouth almost moved. Sit down, Evelyn. This time I did. Slowly. On my terms. The server appeared, silent as a ghost, pouring red wine into crystal. I placed my hand over the rim of my glass before it could be filled. No, thank you. Another mistake, according to the room. Another note in a song none of them recognized. Adrian Voss noticed. Of course he did. The first course arrived on warm white plates over black marble, scallops, citrus, herbs I could not name. Conversation resumed in smooth, expensive currents. Shipping lanes. Real estate. Imported stone. Campaign donations disguised as charity. Nobody said crime. They did not need to. It sat at the table with us anyway. Then one of the rival dinner guests smiled at me across the candles. I have to admit, he said, this is not what I expected from a secretary. A few quiet laughs followed. Measured. Cruel. I set down my napkin. That makes two of us. He smirked. Adrian Voss is famous for strategy. Inviting office staff to a dinner like this feels impulsive. The trap was obvious now. I was not here for decoration. I was here to be tested. Maybe displayed. Maybe humiliated. Maybe used to make someone underestimate him. Maybe all three. Before Adrian Voss could answer, I looked directly at the man. Impulsive would be insulting the only person in the room who takes notes for a living. Silence. A woman among the rival four lifted a brow. And what exactly have you taken note of tonight? There it was. The line drawn in front of me. My pulse kicked once hard. Then my mind did what it always did under pressure. It organized. Filed. Connected. The seating chart, I said. No spouses. No assistants. No unnecessary witnesses. The inner circle is split instead of clustered, which means trust is an issue tonight, not hospitality. And whoever arranged this dinner wanted Adrian Voss watched from more than one angle. Every eye turned. I kept going because stopping would have looked like fear. Also, the man across from me checked his watch 3 times before the first course. Not because he's bored, because he's waiting for a signal. And the woman on his left hasn't touched her wine, even though she lifted the glass twice. So either she doesn't trust the bottle, or she already knows what happens before dessert. The woman's fingers froze around the stem. A chair scraped lightly somewhere behind me. Not one of the guests. Security. The room changed. No raised voices. No gun drawn. Nothing dramatic. Just the invisible machinery underneath wealth and manners grinding into place all at once. Adrian Voss did not look at me first. He looked at the rival four. Then at his 6. Crystal chimed against crystal, soft and expensive, while nobody moved enough to admit fear. The woman I had warned set her glass down with care, so precise it looked rehearsed. Across from her, one of the rival dinner guests smiled with only half his mouth, as if my little comment had turned the room from entertainment into arithmetic. I could feel it happening. Every face at that table was recalculating me. That was the first real shift. Not the dress. Not the heels. Not the way men had gone quiet when I walked in. This. Adrian Voss's 6 said nothing, but silence from powerful men has weight. It pressed against my skin harder than the chandelier light. Harder than the scent of roasted meat and polished wood and old money. The rival four had come here expecting spectacle. A pretty secretary elevated past her station for one embarrassing dinner. Something to laugh about later over cigars and whiskey. Instead, I had interrupted a move before it was made. I kept my napkin folded across my lap and reached for my water, not wine. A man at the far end of the table leaned back in his chair. Mid-50s, silver at the temples, cuff links that flashed when he moved. One of the rival four. Interesting instinct, he said. Do you always inspect what your employer's guests drink? A trap wrapped in manners. I turned my glass slowly between my fingers. Only when the host is too polite to embarrass people himself. A few of Adrian Voss's 6 glanced at him then. Not at me. At him. I saw the first crack. The silver-haired man gave a low laugh. So that's what this is? Politeness. No, I said. This is me saving your evening from becoming paperwork. That landed harder. One of the women among the rival four let out a breath through her nose. Amused. Another guest looked annoyed now, not entertained. Good. Annoyed people make mistakes faster than confident ones. The first course arrived, carried in by staff who had been trained not to look surprised by anything. Plates touched linen. Silverware clicked. The room resumed movement, but not comfort. I could feel questions coming before they were asked. They did not test me with obvious insults. That would have been too easy. They tested where ordinary women fail in rooms like that. Knowledge, nerve, timing. So, another rival guest said, cutting into his fish, what exactly does a secretary do at Adrian Voss's level? There it was. Make me define myself small. I smiled and buttered a piece of bread. Mostly I notice what everyone misses until it becomes expensive. A few of Adrian Voss's 6 hid reactions behind their glasses. I did not look at Adrian Voss. I could feel him anyway. Still, watching. The questions kept coming. Which charities did I support? How long had I worked for Adrian Voss? Did I enjoy art, finance, travel? Which neighborhoods did I think were changing fastest downtown? That last one was the real question dressed as small talk. Not culture. Territory. I answered it without hurrying. I talked about zoning delays, luxury development, shipping access, and which blocks had suddenly become too valuable for the violence people pretended not to see. I mentioned a restaurant lease structure I had typed up 3 months ago, and the Shell LLC hidden inside it. One of the rival 4 stopped chewing. The woman beside him stared at me. How would you know that? I set down my fork. Because men who think women are decoration tend to discuss serious things right in front of them. A chair shifted. This time it came from Adrian Voss's side. One of his 6, broad shoulders, scar near his jaw, looked at me with open disbelief now. Not mocking disbelief. Respectful disbelief. More dangerous. Respect changes a room more than fear does. The silver-haired rival tried again. Or maybe Adrian Voss lets you hear just enough to feel clever. That one was sharper. It was not aimed at my intelligence. It was aimed at my place beside him. I finally looked at Adrian Voss. The candle between us bent in the draft from the vent above, its flame shivering hard enough to make the crystal throw nervous light across the table. I held Adrian Voss's gaze for 1 beat longer than I should have. Then I smiled at the silver-haired rival as if none of this had weight. If that were true, I said, lifting my water glass, then someone here is wasting a very expensive education in misdirection. A few people laughed. Thin laughter. Careful laughter. Adrian Voss did not. But I saw it. The smallest shift at his mouth. Approval, maybe. Or warning. Dinner moved again after that, though it did not feel like a dinner anymore. It felt like a map being unfolded in code. Forks touched porcelain. Low voices crossed over one another. The 4 rival dinner guests spoke in polished fragments. Too polished for people trying to sound casual. Shipping routes. Delays at the port. A change in warehouse insurance. One of them mentioned a cleanup on Fulton Street, then corrected himself too fast and called it a construction issue. Normal people would have heard rich people being vague. I was not hearing that. I was hearing patterns. For 8 months, I had handled Adrian Voss's calendar, his calls, his document flow, the stacks of paper no one noticed because a secretary was supposed to be invisible. I knew which numbers were usually repeated because they hid real amounts. I knew which meetings were fake names covering real ones. I knew which men from the Voss syndicate inner circle stopped using email when a problem became fatal. Across the table, one of Adrian Voss's 6 asked for the Bordeaux by label, but the rival closest to him answered before the server could move. Too fast. Familiar. The kind of reflex people have when they had spoken privately before. Cold moved through me under all the silk and diamonds. I reached for my napkin just to give my hand something to do, and that was when I saw it. A receipt corner, barely visible in the inside pocket of the scar-jawed man from Adrian Voss's inner circle. White paper. Blueprint. A freight company logo I recognized from a packet that had crossed my desk 3 days ago and then vanished before filing. Vanished documents. Changed numbers. Port delays. Private reflexes. Not romance. Not humiliation. A setup. I looked down before anyone caught the change in my face. On the plate in front of me, the lamb was arranged so beautifully it made me angry. Somewhere behind me, a violin was playing something slow and expensive. Somewhere inside my ribs, every note turned sharp. Adrian Voss was answering a question at the far end of the table, voice calm, almost bored. Power sounded quiet on him. That was why people missed danger until it was standing over them. I needed proof before I spoke. Not instinct. Not a guess. So I did the only thing a dismissed woman could do in a room full of men who thought they were smarter than her. I listened harder. The silver-haired rival leaned back and said, "Timing is everything. A late arrival can ruin an entire transfer." Transfer. The scar-jawed man touched his wineglass stem twice with his ring finger. Not nerves. Signal. A second man from the inner circle, seated 2 chairs down, adjusted his cuff, and said, "Only if the driver takes the tunnel." That landed wrong. Too specific. Too casual. It was a route reference hidden in dinner talk, and I knew it because I had rescheduled Adrian Voss's late-night departure twice this week after unexplained changes to security rotation. They were not discussing business in front of him by accident. They were discussing it because they believed I would hear nothing. I lifted my fork, then let it fall with a soft clink against the plate. Adrian Voss looked at me immediately. Good. He had learned one thing tonight. When I broke rhythm, it meant something. "I'm sorry," I said lightly, pressing 2 fingers to my temple. Too much champagne, maybe. The lie bought me 3 seconds. Long enough to lower my eyes. Long enough to let my hand drift near the water glass. Long enough to see the man across from me tense when one of the rival dinner guests touched his cuff twice in a neat, practiced rhythm. Not nerves. A signal. "I need air," I murmured. The chair scraped softly as I pushed back. Nothing dramatic. Nothing loud. Just enough movement to disturb the pattern at the table. Adrian Voss rose at once. That, more than anything, changed the room. A second ago, they had been humoring his secretary. The quiet woman with the glasses. The one he had brought for amusement. The one they thought would smile, blush, and disappear into the candlelight. Now the most dangerous man in the room was standing because I had moved. One of the rival dinner guests smiled too fast. "No need to interrupt the meal." "I said she needs air," Adrian Voss replied. His voice was calm. That made it worse. I kept my fingers pressed lightly to my temple and turned as if I meant to steady myself on the back of my chair. Instead, I let my clutch slip from my lap. It hit the marble floor with a flat snap. Everyone looked down. Everyone except me. I looked at Adrian Voss. Left side. Not the wine. His eyes flicked once to the bottle near his hand, then to the waiter approaching from behind with a silver tray. Not house staff. Wrong posture. Wrong shoes. Too heavy in the shoulders. Adrian Voss moved first. The crystal shattered before I understood whether he had hit the tray or the man holding it. Women gasped. A chair overturned. One of the rival dinner guests lunged sideways, not away, which told me everything. This was not one man freelancing for money. This was planned. Then chaos came fast and ugly. A gun flashed under the white linen. Not Adrian Voss's. Mine was the first scream in the room, and I hated that it was real. Men from the Voss syndicate inner circle surged up from their seats. 6 of them. Sharp suits. Hard faces. Too disciplined to panic, but not fast enough to stop the first shot from tearing into the chandelier chain overhead. Glass rained down in glittering sheets. Adrian Voss caught my wrist and dragged me behind the thick pedestal of a marble serving stand just as another shot cracked through the room. "Did you know?" he asked. "Not thank you. Not are you hurt?" "Of course not." I knew something was wrong. I shot back. "If I wanted you dead, I would have let you drink." His jaw tightened. Even then, absurdly, I saw the answer land. A body hit the floor near us. One of the rival dinner guests. Blood spread dark across white tablecloth. The restaurant had become a battlefield in under 10 seconds, and the elegant string quartet in the corner had gone silent so abruptly it made the gunfire sound even harsher. Adrian Voss glanced toward the private exit. "No," I said instantly. His attention cut back to me, sharp as a blade. "They changed security rotation," I whispered. "That's where they'll expect you to run." Another shot cracked. One of the men from the Voss syndicate inner circle barked in order from across the dining room, forcing the remaining guests down. Smoke curled above the candles. Burned powder and expensive perfume turned the air bitter. Adrian Voss studied me for half a second too long. Then he said, "Fine. Your way." Something in my chest stumbled. Not because he trusted me. He didn't. Not fully. Because he had no choice. I swallowed hard and pointed toward the service corridor beyond the bar. Kitchen. Delivery dock. If their trap is on the private exit, they won't want crossfire near the loading area. Too many witnesses. Too many cameras. "You sound very certain. You brought me here to be underestimated," I said. "Let me be useful." A strange look crossed his face. Regret, maybe. It vanished before I could be sure. The service corridor smelled like bleach, hot metal, and old grease. The music from the dining room faded behind us, replaced by the hiss of the industrial dishwasher and the slam of a swinging kitchen door. My heels clicked too loudly across the tile. Every sound felt dangerous now. Adrian Voss stayed half a step behind me, not crowding me, not trusting the path either. I could feel his attention on the back of my neck like heat. At the loading door, one of the kitchen workers glanced up, saw Adrian Voss's face, and immediately looked back down at a stack of clean glasses. Smart man. I reached for the crash bar, then stopped. No, I said quietly. Adrian Voss's voice came low. What changed? I looked at the narrow window set into the steel door. Darkness outside. One security light. Too clean. Too empty. If I were setting a trap, I'd leave this open. Make us feel clever for avoiding the obvious exit. I turned back toward him. They know how you think. They don't know how I do. For a second, the kitchen noise seemed to disappear. He studied me in a way he never had before. Not like a man looking at his secretary. Not like a man looking at a woman across a dinner table. Like he had found a hidden blade in a velvet box. Then tell me how you think, he said. The question should have been simple. It wasn't. My fingers tightened around my clutch. The satin looked elegant from the outside. Inside, it held a transit card, a cracked lip balm, a folded receipt, and $38 in cash. That was the real shape of my life. Polished on the surface. One bad week from breaking underneath. I think like someone who learned early that attention is expensive, I said. If people think you're awkward, they stop watching. If they think you're harmless, they speak freely. If they think you don't belong in the room, they tell you more than they should. Something changed in Adrian Voss's face. Not pity. Worse than pity would have been easier to survive. This was understanding. He leaned one shoulder against the stainless prep table beside us. That wasn't an accident, he said. No. The word came out flatter than I meant it to. I stared at a row of hanging pans so I wouldn't have to look at him. The glasses. The cardigans. The nervous laugh. Most of it was real in the beginning. My throat tightened. Then I realized real fear can be useful if people mistake it for weakness. A line formed between his brows. Who taught you that? No one had to. I let out a breath that shook on the way out. My father left debts he didn't live long enough to pay. My mother got sick 2 months later. I was 21, working days, taking classes at night, answering calls from men who suddenly sounded very interested in our apartment. I swallowed. You learn patterns when you're scared enough. Who bluffs? Who doesn't? Which smile means mercy? Which one means run? The dishwasher roared again. Plates clattered. Somewhere beyond the kitchen doors, the dinner went on as if the world had not tilted. Adrian Voss straightened slowly. And you still came to work every morning. I almost laughed. Rent still came every month. That isn't the same thing. No, I said. It isn't. Silence stretched between us, but it wasn't empty. It had weight. The kind that settles after something true finally lands. I made myself look at him. You thought I hid behind ugly shoes and bad posture because I had no idea who I could be. My voice stayed calm. Barely. I knew exactly what I was doing. Beautiful women get noticed. Quiet women get overlooked. Overlooked women survive. He took that in without interrupting. That, more than anything, unsettled me. Then Adrian Voss did something I was not prepared for. He said, I misjudged you. Just that. No performance. No smooth edge. No command wrapped around the truth to make it easier for him to hold. A tray hit the tile hard enough to make me flinch. Silverware scattered across the service corridor in a bright metallic burst. One of the line cooks cursed under his breath and bent to gather it, but nobody looked at the mess for long. Every head turned toward the small wall-mounted television above the prep station. My face was on it. Not just my face. The dining room. The candlelight. The moment Adrian Voss had stood too close to me near the table. A still frame caught at the perfect angle, sharp enough to suggest intimacy, dangerous enough to imply weakness. Below it, a breaking headline crawled across the local feed. Voss loses control at private dinner. Rivals question leadership after public distraction. Cold moved through me faster than fear. That footage was not from the press entrance, I said. Adrian's expression changed so slightly most people would have missed it. I didn't. His jaw locked. His gaze went flat. He was no longer the man who had just admitted he misjudged me in a bleach-scented corridor. He was the man the city whispered about. Internal feed, he said. The kitchen door slammed open. One of the men from the Voss syndicate inner circle strode in, breathing hard, phone already in his hand. I had seen all 6 of them around Adrian tonight. Same expensive suits. Same disciplined stillness. But now stillness was gone. It's spreading everywhere, he said. 3 port supervisors just stopped answering. 1 warehouse manager walked off the floor. And the dinner guests are leaving through the east exit. Not fleeing. Moving. Using this. Adrian took the phone, scanned the screen once, then handed it back without a word. That silence was worse than shouting. Around us, the kitchen noise had thinned into something brittle. Even the dishwasher hiss sounded sharper. What else? I asked before anyone could dismiss me. The man looked at me like I had stepped into a room where I did not belong. Adrian didn't. He said, "Answer her." The shift in that single sentence landed like a blade on glass. The man swallowed. Anonymous account released more than the photo. A voice clip too. Cut to sound like Adrian invited rival families here to negotiate from a weak position. People are saying he brought a secretary to a power dinner because he's slipping. There it was. Not just humiliation. Structural damage. Reputation first. Then obedience. Then money. Then blood. I looked back at the television. The clip replayed, but the room in the video was wrong in one detail, so small it made my skin tighten. The angle came from above shoulder height, near the west wine wall. Not a guest seat. Not staff carrying drinks. Someone had placed a device there ahead of time. That wasn't spontaneous, I said. Someone knew exactly where you'd be standing. Adrian turned to me fully. Go on. I pointed toward the screen. The leak hit too fast. Edited clip, headline package, distribution to local media, underworld channels, and operational contacts all at once. That means whoever did it had the footage before the dinner fallout peaked. They were waiting for a trigger. The man from the inner circle frowned. You think one of the rival dinner guests planned it? No, I said. I think someone inside this empire timed it so the rivals could benefit. Nobody spoke. A second later, another one of the 6 entered the corridor, pale in a way expensive tailoring could not hide. The downtown drivers just received new route instructions from a secured internal account. Cash transfer is being redirected from Pier 9. Adrian's eyes hardened. By whom? The answer came too slowly. That was answer enough. An insider had not just embarrassed him. An insider was moving assets. Dinner had been the cover. This was the strike. The first man said, "We can still lock the accounts if we act now." We? I repeated. He looked annoyed. Stay out of this. I stepped closer instead. Who had access to the room assignment, internal camera blind spots, and tonight's guest sequence? No one answered me. The silence after my question felt worse than the shouting from the dining room. Crystal still trembled somewhere behind the walls. A violin had stopped mid-note. In the corridor, under the cold hotel lights, 6 men from the Voss syndicate inner circle looked at each other instead of at me. That was all I needed. Not proof. Pattern. I had spent 2 years outside Adrian Voss's office taking notes, while dangerous men underestimated me in custom suits. They treated intelligence like it only counted when it came wrapped in a gun. I looked at the tablet in the nearest man's hand. Give me that. He almost laughed. Adrian Voss took it from him first and passed it to me without a word. That changed the air. The screen showed 3 frozen account windows, a security map of the hotel, and a transfer queue already in motion. Millions moving through shell companies I recognized only because I had formatted the paperwork myself. Not the illegal details. The rhythm. The naming habits. The way one person always abbreviated Thursday as Thursday, never Thursday. Tiny things. Office things. Invisible things. I scrolled fast. The theft didn't start tonight. One of the inner circle men snapped. We know that. No, I said. You know money is moving. I know who planned around your ego. That shut him up. I turned the tablet toward Adrian Voss and tapped the guest sequence file. The rival dinner guests were seated to force your attention to the right side of the room. The argument at the toast was staged. While everyone watched you, someone used the 6-minute camera blind spot near the private elevator to move signed authorization codes from your study case to the transfer desk upstairs. His jaw tightened. Who? My pulse kicked once. Hard. The person who corrected the seating cards after I printed them. A beat passed. Then one of the 6 inner circle men moved for the stairwell. Too fast. Too early. I grabbed Adrian Voss's sleeve before his security could fire. Alive. The word came out sharp enough to cut. He glanced at me once, then lifted 2 fingers. The hall exploded into motion. 3 men surged after the runner. 2 peeled toward the elevators. The 6th stayed frozen, color draining from his face as if he already knew the next name I would say. I faced him. You asked if we could still lock the accounts. Not if you could. If we could. I stepped closer. Because you needed access you no longer had. He lunged. Not at Adrian Voss. At me. The tablet smashed from my hands. My shoulder hit the marble wall, so hard white sparks burst across my vision. His fingers closed around my throat for half a second before Adrian Voss tore him off me with a violence so fast it barely looked human. A grunt. A crack. Blood on polished stone. I bent, coughing, and saw the fallen tablet still glowing. The transfer queue had not stopped. Don't touch him, I rasped. Watch the accounts. Adrian Voss looked down at me, breathing hard, then back at the screen. He understood immediately. The man on the floor was not the final move. He was the delay. I crawled for the tablet, dragged it into my lap, and forced my eyes to focus through the pain in my throat. The outgoing transfers were set to trigger a dead man release if the primary sender lost biometric access. Clever, brutal, but not perfect. Because the sender had built the logic around what men like them respected: rank, code keys, force. Not clerical habits. I opened the archived scheduling folder and found the duplicate approval chain hidden inside a calendar backup. The traitor had used an old administrative template to mirror executive authority. He thought no one would notice because no one important ever looked at administrative templates. I did. There, I said, stabbing the screen. He cloned the authorization through banquet operations. Cancel the transfer from the event ledger, not the syndicate ledger. Blank stares. So I did it myself. 3 taps. Password field. The password box glowed white against my shaking hand. Before I could type, Adrian Voss moved beside me so fast I felt the cold edge of his tailored suit brush my bare arm. His hand covered mine on the keyboard. Not to stop me. To steady me. Use mine, he said. The corridor went still. I turned and looked at him. Really looked. The marble light from the service sconces cut across his face. All sharp bone and dark control, but something had shifted. He was no longer watching me like a mistake that had become useful. He was trusting me with the one thing men like him never gave away. Access. I entered the code. The system opened. Banquet operations spilled across the screen. Seating charts. Guest flow. Private service timing. Then the mirrored transfer order I had found inside the backup calendar. I canceled it from the event ledger exactly where the false authority lived. A red warning flashed. Transfer reversed. For one beat, no one breathed. Then every phone in the corridor started vibrating at once. One of the 6 men from the Voss Syndicate inner circle checked his screen and went pale. The offshore release just froze. Another swore under his breath. In the dining room beyond the walls, raised voices broke into full panic. The 4 rival dinner guests had just learned the leverage they came to collect was gone. I looked up. Whoever built this expected everyone to protect the vault and ignore the banquet system. The trap wasn't just theft. It was humiliation. Adrian's eyes locked on one man in his inner circle. I followed his stare. He was the only one not checking his phone. Not surprised. Not angry. Just calculating. Tiny pause. Tight jaw. He had already moved on to survival. Adrian stepped forward. The corridor seemed to shrink around him. You arranged the room rotation, he said quietly. You approved the blind spot near the East Hall. And when the transfer failed, you didn't look down. The man reached inside his jacket. I moved before I thought. Not toward Adrian. Toward the tray cart beside me. I slammed it hard into the traitor's arm just as he pulled the gun free. The shot cracked into the ceiling. Plaster dust rained over the silver lids and white linen. One of the other men tackled him into the wall. Adrian ripped the weapon away and drove him face first onto the tile. No one spoke. The traitor coughed blood onto the floor and laughed once, broken and ugly. You brought a secretary to a war. Adrian didn't even look at him. No, he said. I brought the only person in this building who was smarter than all of you. The words hit me harder than the gunshot. Because he meant them. Security dragged the traitor away. In the dining room, the rival dinner guests were escorted out under armed watch, furious and empty-handed. The game they had come to enjoy had turned against them. No spectacle. No public disgrace. No weakness for them to carry back to their families. Just failure. The corridor finally emptied until only Adrian and I remained. Broken crystal glittered near the threshold. Somewhere, a violin recording still played through hidden speakers, absurdly soft after everything that had happened. My pulse was still wild. My lungs still hurt. The silk at my ribs felt too tight. Adrian bent and picked up my abandoned glasses from beneath the service console. One lens was smudged. He cleaned it with the edge of his pocket square like it was something rare, then held them out to me. I took them. I misjudged you, he said. It should have felt satisfying. It did, a little, but not enough. So did everyone else, I said. His mouth almost moved. Not a smile. Something smaller. More honest. The dinner invitation, I said, hearing my own voice steady for the first time that night. It wasn't really about dinner, was it? He looked at me for a long second, and for the first time since I had known him, Adrian Voss answered without strategy. No,